Hi, welcome back to Burning River Bushcraft. In the 1790s, this area was frequented by John Chapman, also known as Johnny Appleseed. Enough with history, let's make some alcohol. So hard apple cider was actually a very popular colonial drink. That is because if you let natural apple juice ferment, it turns hard. Modern apple cider is pasteurized. It's illegal in my area and probably everywhere else for apple orchard or any place that's selling apple cider commercially to sell it non-pasteurized. If you were to have your own fresh apple cider, the natural yeast in the skin over time would ferment and that would give you hard cider. Now what I'm going to do today, this is pasteurized cider. This is from a local apple orchard. 4 minutes is the minimum required by law for pasteurization. So this has been pasteurized for just 4 minutes. But probably what that did is killed all the natural yeast that would have been present in the apples. So I'm going to add yeast to utilize the sugar and make alcohol. Now it's also important to note that this is pure apple cider direct from the orchard. This has got no preservatives, no chemicals, no nothing. You know, this isn't a big box apple cider. This is from an orchard just up the road. Now for yeast, different types of yeast is going to give you different amounts of alcohol. This is just a simple bread yeast, real common. So this alcohol range should be in the 3 to 5% range. If you were to use champagne yeast, that would give you a much higher alcohol content, but that's not really what I'm after. I'm just after a simple experiment to make some hard cider. So another possible option would be to open this container and just let it sit outside. There's yeast and all kinds of bacteria in the air, and that would naturally collect in the cider and ferment it. The problem with that is when you get all types of wild yeast like that, the flavor just could go erratic. That, and I'm in a hurry, so we're not going to do that. So what I have here is a fermentation container. This is not a whole lot different than a 5-gallon bucket. The only difference is because the gases are going to be created by the yeast, you need to have an airlock of some type. Now you can use, a latex balloon, anything that's going to let it expand without bursting your seal. And again, if this wasn't contained, it wasn't a sealed container, you would get all kinds of wild bacteria in here, which is not necessarily harmful, but it's definitely going to alter the taste. So in my sterile fermentation container, I'm going to make a small batch today. I'm going to add 1 gallon of pasteurized apple cider. And again, this has got no preservatives, no colors, no nothing else added to it. It is pure apple cider with a 4-minute pasteurization process. Okay, I'm going to retain that jug. Now, you can make a starter for your yeast just like you do some types of breads. That way you definitely have activated yeast that you add to this. And I've also seen where people add sugar. But because this is fresh from the orchard apple cider, I'm not that concerned with it. I've drank gallons of this sweet cider this year already. I know it's good. I know it's a nice sweet cider, so there should be plenty of sugar in here to activate the yeast. So now on my fermentation container, I'm going to add my airlock, and you can see I've got it filled to the line approximately with water. Now what that's going to do is allow any gases built up by the yeast to escape without letting other particles back in and spoiling the taste of the cider. So after about 12 hours or so, this should start bubbling. It will continue to bubble for probably the next 2 weeks or so. It might be a little less, might be a little more. With a small amount of cider in a bigger container like that, you may not get as much bubbling action through the cap as you would if you were doing a full 5-gallon batch. Now, this is going to take about 2 weeks. I'm going to store this fermentation jug, in a cool, dry place. So any type of cellar was traditionally used. I'm going to keep it here in the basement. There's going to be a certain point in time where you can start tasting this, and as you let it sit, the cider is going to get harder and drier. So if you prefer a sweet, hard cider with a little bit of alcohol content, you can stop the fermentation process earlier. If you prefer a drier, harder cider, then you would let it go until you're completely bubbled out with your yeast. Now, when I jar this, I'm going to let it sit before I actually drink it for probably another week or so, and that's going to let any of the yeast kind of settle through, and I should just have a good cider taste after that. Okay, so we're going to store this, and we will continue to check on it in the next couple weeks, and I'll let you know how it turned out. So it's been about 3 weeks since I started the hard cider project. So this was a gallon of pasteurized sweet cider. I added 1 packet of yeast to it, and it's been sitting in a fermentation container in a cool, dark place for about 3 weeks. So let's crack it open and see what we have. It's definitely turned. It's definitely a hard cider now. Okay, so I'm going to float my alcohol tester in here and see what percentage of alcohol this is. So if I look at my percentage of alcohol by volume, I see 10. And I'm floating right around 6.5. So the clarity's so-so. I've got sediment from the yeast that was actually floating around. I don't know, maybe if I was to stir that, that would change. I'm going to transfer all of this into a jug, give it a shake, and call it good. But making alcohol, of course, isn't that difficult. The trick is to make it where it tastes good. So this is going to be the first actual test of the hard cider itself. Kind of sweet, actually. Not dry, not overly dry, not real strong. Still has a core taste that's definitely cider. It hasn't changed the taste that much. So this has been a great project to work on. You can pick up a gallon of pasteurized apple cider, add 1 packet of yeast per gallon, and let it sit in a fermentation container for about 3 weeks, and you'll have a great drink for the holidays. This has been Jamie Boggs with Burning River Bushcraft. See you next time.